Hey everyone, Brian Lagunas here, and today I'm going to answer another tech question. If you have a tech question you'd like to have answered, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, leave a comment below with your own question, and I may just answer it in my next video. As you can see, I am using a new microphone today. That's because I've had a number of people say that they have noticed a audio-video sync issue on some of my YouTube videos, and honestly, I cannot figure out what could be causing it. Everything works perfect for me, so I'm going to try a different microphone and see if that helps at all. So let me know if you still see that audio sync issue so I can try to dig even deeper into this bottomless hole of audio sync issues. Today's question comes from Yevgeny. He asked, Brian, how do I close a window from within a ViewModel in my WPF application? Well, this is a really good question, and I hate to break it to you, but there are lots of ways to do this. But the most important thing is when you pick an implementation, the number one rule is when you are trying to interact with a view or UI element in WPF using the MVVM design pattern, never, under any circumstance, reference or define a UI component in your view model. Number one rule. And yes, this includes event args. Don't do that either. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about implementation. Now, no matter what approach you take, when you break it down to the core concept of what you're trying to accomplish, we are trying to create an abstraction between the UI and between our view model and business logic, and have the ability to communicate back and forth between them without either one of them referencing each other. This is a very nice, loosely coupled, testable, maintainable, and extensible approach to software development. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create that abstraction. The way you implement it, well, that's going to be up to you. Roll the intro. So the application we'll be working with today is a very simple WPF.NET Core 3 application. As you can see, our main window has a single button on it. This button says close me, and when we click this button, we're going to invoke a command called close command. Now, we are setting the data context of this window in XAML, and you can see we're setting it to an instance of main window ViewModel. Let's take a quick look at our ViewModel. Here we will see that we are using a delegate command from Prism called close command. And whenever that close command is invoked by the button, we will invoke this method close window. So let's run the application and see what we have. Here's the application running. And as you can see, we have our single button. And when I click this button, we want to close the window. So let's go ahead and implement that now. The number one rule in any MVVM application is no UI elements referenced in your view model. Do that, your family may just disown you. Okay, so don't do it. When we break down this problem, the first thing we have to do is we have to implement some type of abstraction from the UI. To do this, we're going to use an interface. So we're going to create a new interface, and we'll just close this something like I close windows. And on this interface, we're going to expose a mechanism for us to call in the view model that will then close the associated window. And we'll do this by adding a property that is of type action, and we'll call it close. We'll make this a simple get set. Now we'll have our view model implement I close windows. Now the expectation is whenever I call this method from within my view model, say close, first we'll check to make sure it's not null, then we'll say invoke. The expectation is that the window would now close. So now that we have this abstraction, we need to hook this abstraction up to the actual window that the view model is associated with. So to do that, let's jump into our main window code behind. Let's just add an event handler for the loaded event. Now, the easiest way to do this is we're going to check if the data context is I close windows, and that's going to be a view model. Then we're going to say view model close plus equals, and then what's going to happen when this is invoked? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to close this window. So we can say this.close. Now, let's go ahead and run the application and see what happens. Here's the application running. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click the close button, and looky there. You're going to say, well, Brian, that's amazing. Oh, what's going on? Well, what's happening is what we're doing is we are checking the data context of this view for the interface. Does it implement I close windows? As you can see, since we are setting the data context to an instance of main window view model, and we look at our view model, and it does in fact implement I close windows, our code is saying, okay, our data context, it knows how to close windows. I'm expecting this close action, and when this close action is invoked from wherever it's coming from, in this case, our view model, we're going to close this window instance. What we have done is we have successfully abstracted away any UI element such as a window from our view model, yet we can still control and interact with that UI element. So what's really nice about this abstraction is we could take it a step further. Let's add a method, for example, that says can close. It might be nice to be able to control from within the view model if the window's even allowed to close in the first place, right? So in this case, we're going to say bool can close. Let's return false, saying no, it can't close. We're not going to let you close. Let's go back to our main window code behind, and we could just extend this functionality. Because we have this abstraction, we can simply hook into the closing event of the window. And as this window is closing, we can set the e.cancel to the inverse of our view model .can close. Now, the reason we are doing the inverse is because the can close will return true or false, which represents if the window can close. True if the window can close, false if it can't. In this case, e.cancel will control if the window doesn't close, the opposite of that, right? So e.cancel is true if you don't want to close it. So we have to inverse that method result. So now what we can do is we can run the application. Let's go ahead and click the close me button. I'm clicking it, and it's not closing. And that's because we are telling the window in the closing event to cancel it based on the result of our view model can close. And the great part about this abstraction is not only does it work on the button itself, but it actually works on, say, the close button of the window directly. So I can click this close button and it will not close. It's not going to close because we're controlling this with logic in our view model. Now, if I come back from view model and we turn true, let's go ahead and run the application again. And now we should expect the window to be able to close when we click the close button. Yes, that works perfectly. Or when we click the X button. Boom, works perfectly. Now that we've implemented a pretty good abstraction from the window in the view model, let's talk about some options on how we can make this code more reusable. Because let's be honest, if we look at our code behind here, you're probably not going to want to add this to every window you want to close from the view model. So you have a number of options here. One option is create a custom behavior. You can create an attached property. Maybe you create a dialog service that basically creates all this plumbing for you before you even show the window. But in this example, let's take the simplest approach possible, and we're going to create a new attached property. In this case, I'm going to create a new public class. We'll call it window closer. And in this class, we're going to create our attached property. To do this, we'll use the prop A code snippet, which creates an attached property. This will be a Boolean. The name of this property will be called enable window closing. And the owner of this class is going to be our window closer class. And the default value for the property metadata will make false. Looks like we need to add some using statements here. So let's go ahead and use our handy dandy quick action tooltip there, and we'll add that. The next thing we want to do is we want to respond to the changing of this property. So I'm going to add a property change callback. So I'll say on, we're going to call this, what are we going to enable, so on enable window closing changed. We'll go ahead and generate that method. Now what we want to do is let's write some defensive code here, okay? Let's make sure that the incoming dependency object is actually a window. So say, hey, if the incoming D, which is our dependency object, is a window, give that the name window, then what we're going to want to do, and this is going to depending on your implementation of how you're setting the data context. In our case, we actually have to hook into the loaded event of the window itself. Now, if like I said, this depending on the timing of when your data context is set, you may have to listen for the data source changed event as an example. But we'll say sender E, and when this happens, when this loaded event occurs, all we want to do actually is we want to just take this code, we're going to copy it or cut it out of there, and we're going to paste it right in here. Now we're just going to make some small changes. We'll say window.dataContext. We'll make sure we change this to window.close. And of course, we'll say window.closing. Make sure we add our very last semicolon there. And you know what? We are done with this. Let's just go ahead and remove all that code from our window code behind. Now let's go into our view and let's apply our attached property. We'll say window closer, enable window closing equals true. Let's go ahead and run our application. Here's our application running, and I'm gonna hit the close me button and our window closes. Let's go into our view model, scroll up, and we will change the can close result to actually return false. And let's test to make sure that logic still works. And I'm clicking the button and it's not closing. I click the X button on the window, it will not close. So our attached property is behaving exactly how we would expect. Now, in a production application, you may need to be more careful with how you are registering and unregistering with events. You have a number of options on how you apply this abstraction, but this is the basic idea about how you interact with UI elements from your view model while keeping that solid abstraction that the MVVM pattern requires.